Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have two amazing guests. I have Kristin Demoranville and Andrew Rose, two cybersecurity professionals. And today, we're going to be talking about hackers targeting Canada's food supply. Welcome, you two. How are you doing?
Super. How are you, Tracy?
Good.
I'm feeling good.
Yeah, good. This is going to be a good conversation. Kristin, you're returning to the show, and we're going a little bit deeper. I think in our last episode, we spoke more about manufacturing, touched a little bit on how hacking has affected farmers. Now we're really going to go into that. Andrew's joining us. So a quick little snippet about each of our guests, and we're going to dive right in. So Kristin is a cybersecurity professional who works in the food industry. Her podcast, Bites and Bytes, is centered around conversations between cybersecurity and the food industry. Andrew is an advisor to BioISAC, and he brings cybersecurity awareness, mitigation, and response to the agriculture industry. There we go. So we have two really smart people joining us to talk about cybersecurity, which, Kristin, I can't believe it. We were talking and I was learning a lot in our episode together, and it was all so new. And you know the strangest thing that happened? After I published that episode, literally the attack on Co-op happened, the attack on the car and equipment, like it was within a week. So I'm like, this
like
is
a day. It was like within a day. It was really creepy. I did hang my head a little bit thinking, oh man, we missed that time frame. We should have met like 2 days after that, but it's okay.
I'm like, did we cause this?
No, we did not. I do not take responsibility. I will blame a planet alignment before I claim responsibility there.
Absolutely. It was just funny how I'm like, is this really a thing? And we're talking and you're sharing more. And then it happened. I'm like, wow, well timed. And our episode was well received. So Andrew, can you share a little bit more about who you are, your background, what you do? Kristin, I'll get you to do the same. And then let's dive in. There's some interesting stuff we have to talk about.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And thank you, Tracy, for letting me speak here too. This is an important message and an important topic, and I'm excited about this, the time I get to spend here with you. So I'm an agriculture and climate futurist, and I focus on projects that benefit our species 3 generations from now, primarily in agriculture production. And my subspecialty are novel plants and proteins. So think the insects, the algae, space agriculture, things like that. And I'm an accidental cybersecurity expert of all things. I was working for a very large agricultural bank in the United States, and I ran a tabletop exercise around a cybersecurity incident just as a team building exercise. And what came out of that really surprised me about the level of vulnerabilities that were present. And I did some diligence and found out the entire agriculture supply chain was equally as vulnerable. And for the past 8 years, mostly as a volunteer, I've coordinated with our government agencies and largest ag and food companies in America and on the planet to ensure that they have some level of resiliency and elasticity built into the supply chain. And as you mentioned, I'm currently working under contract with the Bioeconomy Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or what we call the BioISAC, and bringing awareness, mitigation, and response to the ag supply chain. So again, thank you so much for letting me be on your show here.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Kristin?
And Andrew and I are not meeting here by accident. He's actually been a guest on my show already. So, and we meet probably every other week or so to talk all things ag and get excited about crazy things like cow stomachs and all kinds of fun things like the Jones Act last week. So we definitely have a professional information sharing group going. As you said, I'm Kristin and Demoranville. I am the CEO and founder of Ans and Sage, which is that cybersecurity firm that focuses directly on food and ag. And also, I am the CEO of Ans and OT, which is a risk intelligence platform for OT environments. So agriculture, food, those are operational technology environments. And it manages risk and helps you get through better strategies there. And also, I am the host of Bites and Bites podcast. We actually just are celebrating some milestones. I just hit 5K, so I'm very excited. It's very exciting when you get there as a podcaster, you know that you finally crossed the line. So it's been really amazing because I've got to have these great conversations with some fantastic people, including both yourselves. And I've really enjoyed all that for sure. So yeah, we're here to talk about, fun hacking and things that are going on in Canada and globally. And it's funny because Andrew and I have been chatting about this a little bit over email, and it's just kind of fortuitous that we're having this conversation today.
Well, I'm excited. It's unfortunate. And of course, that's a dreamer world, but it's unfortunate that we're even talking about this because how frustrating, as we will get into right away. So, Kristin, you brought this to my attention. There was a mainstream news piece done that Russian hackers are directly attacking Canada's food system. So I'm going to say, can you guys comment on this? Whoever wants to take that, and just let's talk high level and then get into all the details.
Well, I'll jump in here then, and that wonderful little pause there. So on a very high level, if you think about what is happening in Ukraine right now, when Russia wants to kill populations, they take out energy in the winter, so people freeze to death, and they take out food in the summer, so they starve to death. And it's been a very successful technique for depopulating large swaths of land that they want to then occupy with a small amount of population. If you look at who their antagonists are around the world, not only Russia, but Iran and the peoples of China, view us in an adversarial stance. And when you have an adversary in a wartime environment, the best thing to do is pre-position your offensive assets within their critical infrastructure for a variety of reasons, whether it's just an outright end of civilization or more of an annoyance and a distrust of your government agencies. So that more on a macro level, but Kristin, I'm sure you've got a lot more to share.
Yeah, I think a lot of what it comes down to is, and I hate to say it like this, but there's a lot of testing going on between the nation states that Andrew mentioned with other countries. So example would be a lot of the things that happen in North America are very connected because our supply chain is connected. We're on a continent together, right? So if you start messing with somebody here, it's going to throw off a system here, or if I test it here, I can see if I'm going to make any changes or wreak havoc over here. So it's kind of a trial and error moment. I hate to say it like that. And I hate that Canada's kind of being used as a test bed for potential attacks other places. But yeah, this is what's happening. And it's really scary. And it's scary too, Tracy, because nobody's got a good handle on agriculture and as a critical infrastructure, right? We know this as people who are in the agricultural environment. We understand the environment. We get what's going on. We get the interdependencies. We get all of that. But if you take it up the level of people who make policy and decide where grants go and more money goes and more funding, including like the Agricultural Partnership Act that just came out with that, I think it was what, 22.6 million or something like that. Is that any of that money going to be put towards cybersecurity or technology safeguarding, or is it just for tech? Like I have questions there. So this is where it gets kind of frustrating. As you said, this is the frustration level. We know bad things are happening, but there's just like not enough happening to correct it. We're constantly stuck in this wheel of recovery mode. We need to get to resilience mode. And Andrew and I are both like on that soapbox all the time of, you know what, we can get through these issues and we can be resilient through them, or we could try to get through these issues and just fail. And failure in this regard could be catastrophic, right? You couldn't feed your country. You can't supply out, so you're not making any money as an export. We've got disease to worry about. You have all kinds of other environmental impacts. I mean, the list goes on. And this is like a doomsday speech. I apologize to the listeners, but it's the reality of the moment, right? Like here we are, the reality of the moment. And there's just so much to consider. And this is what is so important about the work that Andrew's doing and the work that I definitely stand up and jump up and down from as well, is trying to work with policymakers and any type of government bodies to get them to be like, have their little click aha moment. Oh yeah, we really should care more about this, and water and food are really priority, and we need to get to that place. Canada's no different. You guys are struggling the same way the US is. You're struggling the same way all these other countries. You know, unfortunately, you shift places sometimes where the mindset goes. And because of these hacks, it's showing a weakness. And it's that test bed weakness, like I said, that's scary. Like that to me, it's scary. And people are like, oh, it's just a dairy that was attacked. Who cares? You know, they moved on from it. It's fine. No, it's not, because this is what's going to happen. If they're going to find one vulnerability here, more than likely it's in another place, and then it's in another place. And then you might find that same type of equipment or software that was in there that's in the pharmaceutical side, or it's in the water plant. It's all interconnected. It's so interconnected in the systems thinking, you know, and systems, that it's ridiculous now. Like I'm at the point where I'm just like, okay, if you go and do this here, this is going to be a problem, and then it's going to be 50 times worse on this side because you didn't fix this one thing over here. And that's the whole recovery mode, caught in the recovery loop mode. You're constantly blue screening, to use a tech term, just constant blue screen over and over again. And I think most people can respect that right now, considering the CrowdStrike incident also happened, Tracy, while we were in between our episodes here. And not that that was a cyber attack, but that was an incident, I guess is the word I'll use. And it was definitely a lot of people are still struggling with it, unfortunately.
Jeez, eh? Well, why don't we go there? There's two things I want to talk about. There's some things that happened right after we released our last episode, some stuff that you guys know about that I definitely don't know about. So why don't we talk about it on a higher level and then go down to primary producers and kind of look at those different levels? Do you want to do that?
Sure.
Okay. Do you guys want to speak to that? Like the co-op and what happened with the machinery and automobile parts system? Like, do you want to go there first?
So I believe that the farm dealership was also part of the dealership problem that happened, I think, a lot of places. It was a ransomware attack that just ripped the systems to shreds. Meaning, if you're unfamiliar with ransomware, is essentially a bad actor, a hacker, whatever you want to call them, gets into your system and somehow locks that system because it finds out that it's a primary system that you're going to freak out about. They'll take your data, they'll scrape it off, they'll put it onto the dark web, and they'll sell it so they get a double or triple payout depending on what they're doing. And then they'll lock your system. So that data is just trashed, essentially. You can't even use it again. The other thing they do is they will affect your backup system, so you can't back up as fast. So you be like, oh, I'll just back up. I have backup data on wherever I have it. No, they'll mess with that too, so you can't get to it fast. So that's basically what happened when it came down to the dealerships. They halted the whole system. So they had to go back to pen and paper, which is great because you're still resilient, right? You're still functioning. It's the same with the GPS on the tractors. They could roll back to analog. It wasn't preferred, but you could still plant, right? It could still happen. Same type of idea with the farm dealerships. And then the co-op system, I believe, was the same as a ransomware, but it was a rough time because it locked up the fuel system. So people couldn't buy fuel. I think it was like 7 or 8 days that they were down. I could be wrong about the days, but it was enough that it was significant for people. And that caused just chaos because you can't get gas, you can't move, you can't pay for gas. I mean, I'm sure some of it could be done with cash, but who carries cash? Like, unless you're in a country that's cash prevails, but not in ours, not in yours. So that's really complicated. And then there was also another dairy that got hit with a data breach that didn't affect the operations, but it definitely took customer data, and they're still probably dealing with fallout from that, aka lawyers and other fun things like that. So yeah, there was a pretty significant few things that happened, since we talked last, Tracy. I feel like we could have a whole show just on the things that happen in 30 days in cybersecurity and agriculture and food. Maybe that's somebody can take that and start being a podcast host for that.
Totally. Okay, so that's more the higher level, the big organizations. You mentioned, and the clip that I watched was about the dairy producer that you just mentioned. So we have a lot of farmers in the audience. That's our audience. And they might be going, okay, well, that's big companies. That's them.
Yep.
And then we forget how much tech, I mean, big dairies, chicken, hog farms, it's all tech, right?
Yep.
But sometimes we forget how much we use tech and how we are very vulnerable. So do you guys want to speak to primary producers and what has happened, the dairies, and where they're at risk?
Andrew, I'll let you take this.
Sure. Well, I mean, yes, everyone is at risk, and the risk is only going to increase exponentially with AI-enabled cyber tools that are out there that our adversaries can use. So it's no longer a person over a keyboard. It's going to be one person over a keyboard with a billion bots out there looking for some sort of cyber penetration. So just understanding, going back to what Kristin said, that we need to plan to be attacked. You need to plan to recover this. It's a good idea when the sun is shining to make hay, they say. It's a good idea to go through an exercise where you have no internet for a week and see if you can still run your operations that way. Because that's what a cyber attack is, normally 9 to 11 days on full recovery. And that's with good backups. That's with everything in place. So you can kind of do the math from there if you haven't taken those steps. One of the biggest risks that I see just from a hardware standpoint is many farm operations share one router for family, for personal use, and for business use. And each of those are different vectors that our adversaries will get in and they'll play it off of each other. And I want to go back and just stress something I should have said earlier, that this is cyber and related threats. So under related threats, we review information warfare as a related threat, as well as animal activist. And both of them are being used by our adversaries in very smart ways. I mean, Chris and I talk about this. I sometimes am just blown away how brilliant some of these attacks are, because they're multi-layered. It's not just one punch you in the face and hope you give you money. They could have an extortion going on with AI generated pictures of family members. They could reach out to your competition. There's a lot of different things they can do to make it just a really hard business. Another thing that's really simple for a farmer to do is turn their phone on and walk their property and see how many Wi-Fi nodes they pick up. Do they recognize all those Wi-Fi nodes, and they have passwords to those Wi-Fi nodes? Animal activists are very good at putting cameras on different facilities, and they will manipulate that video in such a way. And sometimes you can pick those up walking your farm with your phone on.
Wow.
Kristin, I will let you. And also anything that touches the internet is high risk. And if you got something attached to the internet, make sure you understand how to change that password, or the vendor does, because otherwise you're just both not only bleeding information out to the internet, but you've also created a portal for an adversary to get into your farm and just take you down.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that happen because of this, Tracy, is because you're farming. You're busy farming. You don't have time to think about your tech. You just need to farm, right? There's only so many hours per day. There's no way you're going to be able to do every job. We all know this, right? And I think it frustrates me that cybersecurity is left up to the farmers. It's not, there's no call a friend. I mean, you can call your friend, of course, but like there's no real community building there in terms of that, because it's still new-ish. I mean, it's not really new. I mean, cybersecurity, InfoSec has been around for 30-ish years, but it's just getting really more into this particular world tech-wise. And I think Andrew's so right. I've seen it so many times where the house Wi-Fi is connected to the chicken coop, monitoring the chickens. Do you know what your kids are doing on the internet? Do you know what you're doing on the internet? Do you use the same password for your personal email as your work email, or as your gaming account to get into whatever you play, or for your Facebook, or any of that stuff, right? This is always a no-no. You keep your business and your personal separate as much as possible, because if you have a breach, which more than likely has happened with your password for your personal email, it's going to breach your business eventually. And people are like, oh, that wouldn't happen to me. Hackers and bad actors are the most patient people on the planet. They will wait. They will sit there, and I swear they have more patience than anybody I've ever come across ever, because they know their payout will be so big that they're fine to wait. The other thing too is the thing that scares me too, especially with these nation state attacks, is Andrew said it really well, is it's either a disruption to be annoying or it's to hurt. And we don't want it to hurt. Because if your brand gets hit, your small dairy farm or your small pigs or small chickens, it's going to hurt people. We're already seeing massive issues in the US right now with listeria. I'm not going to go down that road right now, because that's a whole other conversation, of course. But we don't want to have a foodborne illness come because your livestock got corrupted because of a cyber attack. Like, I mean, that's as crazy as it starts to get. And this is not crazy talk. It's actually legit. We have had situations happen globally that this is starting to come through. So I don't want everybody to be like, oh God, we're in big trouble. Yes, we are. But I don't want people to think that there isn't a way to back from this. Like Andrew said, you just have to know what's in your environment, walk your farm, figure it out. You don't have to like walk your farm if you don't want to. I mean, you can literally have someone come out and just do it for you. You can probably pay a teenager down the street to do it, to be truthful. There's little devices that you can get that you can hold in your hand and walk around. There's also, I mean, you can buy those devices off Amazon, which is pretty terrifying, and then you could wreak havoc on your whole farm, but don't do that. There's other ways around this. Do you even know how much it would cost if your entire operations were shut down because of a tech device that didn't work? Do you have any idea what that looks like financially? Those are kind of the plannings you need to go through. You need to go through exercises in your head, even if you sit around your kitchen table and talk about it. That's a great step. What happens if we get hit with an attack today? If something bad happened, what would we do? And I go back to JBS as a great example, the meat company. When that happened, they couldn't move the cattle. There's no holding pens. Like, what are you going to do? Retract it to the farm? You can't. They probably turned everything over. There's no feed for them. So what do you do? Whose problem does that become? That's the question. Like, do you want it to be your problem or the distributor's problem or the producer's problem? Whose problem is it? A cyber attack is everybody's problem in the supply chain when it happens. If it's your neighbor down the street that got hit by the attack, that's going to either affect you because you're going to have to help them out, or it could potentially affect you because you were connected because you shared email credentials one day. I mean, it's that kind of thing. It's so interconnected. It's so interdependent. And especially in a tight-knit community like agriculture, where we depend on the community, like this makes a lot of sense to me even more. And the bad actors and hackers and the nation states, they understand this. They take the time to get to know the details of your communities. I've seen it in corporate businesses, and on an enterprise level, I've started to see it on a smaller level. It is so intense how much research they do on places before they do it. And that's the patience part coming in. So like I said, I'm not trying to like scare people, but I'm going to wake them up, because you can be resilient if you want to. We want you to be resilient. Just stop being in recovery mode. Don't just think, oh, we'll just recover by going on paper and pen. If you can, that's great. But how are you going to actually get through it? We want you to survive and be resilient through a cyber attack. Andrew and I will preach this. We will wear t-shirts constantly.
Okay, I need to just break it down here, because my brain's going, okay, what? If you're not in this, it's just so out of your realm, as I can imagine the farmers in the audience are going, what? So let's really break it down. We're saying, let's say the co-op, and then that parts software system, there's the dairy hack. And I guess really regardless of who it is, you guys are saying the Russians are attacking the Canadian food supply. And really, I don't know that we need to assign a name, but regardless, they're doing that to test for weakness.
That's right. You got it. You said it. You're
well, and
you're
also,
right there.
I mean, weakness number one and financial gain number two. If you look at why North Korea is so successful in their hacking, they have no money. So they hack all the crypto accounts. They're very sophisticated at. The FBI put an alert today on that one. So think about Russia and the financial pressure they have right now with their oil fields being taken offline, the distilleries being taken offline. They still need revenue and income. So there is still a financial gain that the Russians have, but there's going to be a crossover point as well.
Okay. It's funny. Sometimes you think you're worldly, and then you start talking to people such as yourself, and they're like, wow, I know nothing about this world. Oh, okay. So there's that. And then now let's break it down for farmers. And I mean, we spoke about the dairy operation, but what does a cyber attack look like? Let's say, okay, so it's a dairy farm, it's a hog farm, it's a chicken farm. I've been in all those barns. There's a lot of electrical, a lot of machinery to make feed go round. So when they hack it, what are they doing? They're shutting down systems. like barn fans, like feed systems? What does this look like? Does it mean potential?
You're answering your own questions, Tracy.
Okay.
We don't have to say anything. Your imagination's running with this already. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
like,
the
okay.
milking parlor, all that stuff.
Yep.
So you can't milk, but if they're shutting down barns, I mean, then it goes to a backup generator, wouldn't it? And that should be independent of.
One would think,
That's
right?
a good thing to check.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is something to know.
I'm just trying to figure this out because I think myself and most farmers would be like, what and why? What does this mean, right? So
Sure.
not only are you loss of revenue, you can't milk, you can't get the feed to the chickens, the cows with the robots. You're also potentially fans down in a barn, a hog barn. We have a hog barn right beside us. Fans go down, pigs die, right?
Yep.
Like, all pigs die. You see them backup comes on, but okay, sorry guys, I had to talk that out loud. I was just trying to.
No, you're right. You're so
Well,
right.
Kristin, wasn't there an incident in Canada where a pig farm was held hostage
Wasn't that a while? It was a couple
by
years
some
back.
hackers? Yeah, but I mean, it can happen.
Yeah. I mean, you could hang your pig's life in the balance if you don't pay the ransom. I could see that totally working. I don't think that that's something that's as popular as just stealing data or just disrupting.
Okay.
But if you had, that would probably be more of a brand disruption as well as just destruction in general. If the public found out that you were hacked, let's say, and you are a dairy farm, and the milk could have potentially been compromised, that would probably be really bad, right? Like you wouldn't want someone to not buy your product, or you couldn't sell your product to a distributor or a grocery chain because of your cyber attack. So that's actually something that's what worries me more about the liquid dairy aspect. Also, too, considering that dairy products are so popular now, cottage cheese, yogurt, those things are flying off the shelves. I mean, you can't keep them on the shelves at this point. I mean, my favorite cottage cheese is never available because it's always out, right? So if you think about that disruption for the population, for a brand, that's big bucks right there. Like that's some big things. In terms of disruption for the animals themselves, Andrew already mentioned it. Activists. I mean, you can literally hire hackers as a service. You know, like you call it for a pizza, you can call up a hacker. Like it's that kind of stupid easy now. So if somebody really wanted to disrupt and make a scene or do whatever they do because they're passionate about what they feel and they don't have a healthy way to express it and they're going to do it in a negative way, that's one way they could do it. I'm not encouraging anybody to do that, by the way. So if anybody just heard me say that, do not do that. That is actually, you will be jailed. Don't do that.
Well, I mean, the FBI says it this way. You have a First Amendment right here in the United States to say whatever you want, wave a sign, have a cowbell, have a bullhorn, that's fine. As soon as you take an action, there's a risk and a consequence. Correct. So everyone, doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum, I fully embrace our right to speak out and say these things. I think it's a beautiful thing about democracy. But should you take that action, understand that there probably will be a significant consequence. And for the animal activists, again, looking at Canada as a test bed, I saw blips 2 years ago that some animal activist groups were potentially being used as a cat's paw for foreign terrorist organizations because they shared a common interest, or at least they could profess to share a common interest with the animal activist and encourage them into an action they may not have otherwise taken.
Yeah, it's just these hacker gangs. They it's just toxic, right? They just prey on toxic traits and behaviors.
Teaming up with people that have another motive and then doing. Wow.
Yeah, and I think the real thing, and I know Andrew and I have spoken about this at length at times, the problem is that human beings always really truly believe we're going to do the right thing, right? We're going to be good people. We're going to do what's right. And I love the fact that we're trusting as human beings and we're trying to do that. But the reality is that we're not at all. Like there's just, if something doesn't feel right in your operations when you're on the farm, something's off, like it was a little slow or it was a little weird, you need to like put your hand up and start calling a friend, call a farm bureau, whoever you need to call, and get somebody to look at it. Because the moment that the faster you can connect with if there's something actually wrong on a cyber front, the faster you can get forensics teams in, you can get all these people to help you, and then survive it, right? Because you want to survive and be resilient through it. You don't want to have to put down livestock because you had a cyber attack or watch them be, put down because of it, or have your product be destroyed on the way out, whatever it is. I think that's the stuff that I think about of how can we be more supportive as a cybersecurity community to the agricultural community, because we can sit here all day long till we're blue in the face and tell you all this stuff, right? But you're the one that's going to be the first line of defense. You're the one that's going to smell that something's not right, literally or figuratively. What can you do? And the real thing is not to panic, but stay curious. Cautionly curious, as I call it, or optimistically curious. You always want to just be like, all right, this doesn't feel right today. Something's moving a little weird, or somebody got a weird email and I don't know what to do with this. Or honestly, that's when you phone a friend. Like, just, it's not a big deal. Nobody minds. I mean, I get text messages from all kinds of people that say, is this phishing? And I said, delete it, get away from me. Don't send me this. Or just delete it. This is my old, I know Andrew will agree with me on this. If anybody sends you something, text, email, anything like that, that seems fishy, and you delete it, don't feel bad about deleting it. If it really was legit, they'll come back and they'll come talk to you. They'll call you. They'll come knock on your door if you are in close proximity. I don't feel badly about deleting something that I think could be suspicious at all. And I think people have to be in that mindset a little bit more. But the community as a whole just needs to just be a little more, approach things with a little more curiosity. Hey, this is not right today. This doesn't feel right. Is it me? Is it the weather? Is it the machine? Is it the animal? Like, what's going on? And you can always sense when something's not right on the farm, right? Generally speaking, but now you got to take that into tech, which is a little bit of a reach, but it's still on your farm. It's still part of your environment. You have to embrace it.
I feel we almost should have had a conversation before the conversation so I could go through the paces in my mind, get the shock factor out, and not be processing it in public in front of everybody. But I'm sure they're doing the same thing, going like, I don't get it. Why? Right? Like in the clip that was in mainstream media, they had talked about the co-op. I was thinking just the gas, but it was also the food stores too that were down, right? So really, at the end of the day, they're just attacking, holding people hostage for money, but also disrupting the system.
Yes.
Right? Just
yeah, that's right. You're totally right. You're absolutely right. Tracy, you're following the train of thought beautifully.
Okay.
You're not saying anything incorrect.
Okay. It's just always fun when you're processing things on screen with everybody, I'm sure, in the audience. If you don't deal with this, how do you know, right? And that's why I wanted to bring you guys on, because I don't think about this, and I'm in IT-ish, right? I'm sure everybody in our audience is not waking up thinking about this stuff.
And I wish they didn't have to, truthfully.
Yeah,
I know Andrew thinks the same thing there, that we wish you didn't have to think about this. We wish it was just business as usual. But this is now business as usual. Welcome to the future. Hi.
Fun.
This is what it is. And the more you keep adding tech and the more you keep doing cool things with tech, and I'm not saying all tech's bad, and I love it. I love it just as much as anybody else. And it's super helpful, especially being efficient and production levels with any type of farming at all. But we have to take it with the good and the bad, right? And this is the bad. This is like the real bad.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so in our audience, we also have professionals that are in these big companies. So let's go 2 levels. Unless you guys want to do any final words, thoughts, sharing on some of these attacks, any of that, we can do that. But I'm moving into the preventative stage here in my mind. I'm like, okay, how do we stop this? So big companies, and maybe I'll ask this question now. Are big companies, not the primary producer, is our industry ready, protected, and resilient against cybersecurity attacks? I'll let you guys answer that.
Sure, I'll jump in here. I've often spoken in private sessions with policymakers and decision makers that don't appreciate the role agriculture plays in our civilization, our ability to have a civilization. And I usually start off with reminding them that if a child doesn't eat for 5 days, they're likely to break a law. And if they go 3 weeks without food, the government's going to fall. Just to understand how critical it is for agriculture. Generally, we've got about 3 days of food in process at any given time. It's an on-demand society. So when you have the macros of the equation of just how fraught that could be, and then you look at what a species like us needs to survive, we need water, we need food, we need shelter. You take out one of those underpinnings, and we often joke in America for critical infrastructure support that water and agriculture fight for the bottom of the list in terms of support and resources. Not that there's anything wrong with space or technology or things like that. We certainly need transportation, but you know, you can go without your car for a few weeks. You can't go without food for a few weeks. And another thing I do want to point out, just going back to some other things, in 2023, the FBI, or I don't know, I think it was the FBI or one of the other agencies, said that 2023 is the year of threat convergence, where it's no longer just cyber, it'll be layered attacks on top of each other. And unless we have a converged response to these threats, instead of a siloed response, the cyber team takes the cyber, or the biosecurity takes the bio. Unless we have a converged response to these threats, we're always going to be playing off our back foot. Right now, in terms of and with dairy in particular, the secondary attack is an information warfare foray that is stressing drinking raw milk. We haven't attributed it right now to which adversary is funneling the money behind that campaign. We think we see fingerprints from two adversaries actually, so it might be a combined two of the four that we mentioned before are pushing that narrative out there. And this is another way for our populations to lose distrust in a core pillar of what they believe is our agriculture cornerstone. If you think about the rest of the world and how they view dairy, dairy is a sacred liquid. It's the liquid of life. We in a Western society don't quite have that same viewpoint. We certainly like our cheeses and we like our ice creams and our butters, but we don't view that as that gift of life that other countries do. So this is just Andrew supposing this out here, but I assume that our adversaries, when they're picking agriculture targets, assume like them that dairy was that more meaningful as a target. And if we can lose distrust in our dairy system, then we can start losing distrust in our governance and our society. Because at the end of the day, it's easier for a dictator to deal with a dictator than a dictator to deal with a democracy. So there is an endpoint to a lot of these attacks.
True.
Well said. That was good. Okay. Our big companies, I'm going to assume that was really well said. I'm going to assume our bigger companies are getting on this. Hope probably not as fast as you guys would like to see. I have those people in the audience, but for the sake of this podcast, pardon me, and video show, let's talk about farmers. You mentioned one or two things to do, to not do. There's a farmer sitting there listening, watching this. Let's bring it home to them on what they should or shouldn't do on their operation, just so we can really have some tangibles. And then we'll go to insurance and then who to call if something happens. And by the way, I'm going to say it out loud every time I think of this. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters.
Yeah, there's no Ghostbusters, unfortunately.
I was sending you guys, I sent some questions ahead of time and I put, who do you call? And then in my head, of course, Ghostbusters, right? So I was going to say, who's the Ghostbusters here, right? Okay, so let's talk about farm prevention at that level. What should we do? What shouldn't we do?
Do not use default passwords and accounts. So when you get a new piece of equipment, make sure you change that. If you don't know how to change it, it will be in the manual, or the tech that's assigning it will teach you how to rechange the password. That's crucial because you can literally take that manual that you have for whatever piece of equipment. It's online. They use that stuff. I can't even tell you how many times I've done that in my career as well, where I've had to get into something and I couldn't figure out how to get into it. I just went online and found the manual and was able to get in and bypass the system. And this was in a food production facility. So, I mean, talk about big companies. I don't know how to say it any better. The other thing too is if you do have a Wi-Fi, make sure you have a separate Wi-Fi for your work equipment. And keep your cell phone or your mobile devices off that network unless it is a work-related thing. Don't just let any Yahoo, if you do farm tours, don't let them get on your network. Please, God, don't do that. Because you probably don't have a liability check box for that either. The other thing too is anybody who are bringing onto the farm, make sure that they sign an agreement about getting onto your equipment. Basically, it's just like a user acceptance. It's kind of like when you're getting a new phone or a new anything and you have to, clear through the user acceptance level. Have that available. I know that sounds tedious, but it should be part of your new hire paperwork anyways. The other thing too is I know everybody's going to groan when I say this, except for Andrew, he's going to laugh. But there really needs to be a bit of cybersecurity awareness training when you bring people onto your farm, meaning employees, even yourself. It doesn't have to be a big lengthy thing. It doesn't have to be a big deal. You could just be like, don't use the same password you're using for your home account on your work account. Don't, don't exchange passwords with anybody you work with. Don't password share. Please God, don't password share. That stuff becomes very rabid like a wildfire if you start sharing those passwords. Now, I realize that sometimes you can't because there's like all these things that have to be done because you might have gloves on and you can't type. I understand all that. There are ways around that which you can get people to help you with, of course. The other things too is this is the big one for me. And this is something I'm probably going to have to be standing on a soapbox alone for this one as well. But do you really need to have that tech in your environment? Do you really need it? Do you need it because your neighbor has it and it's awesome and that's why you need it? That's not a reason. Do you need it? Do you need to have that there? Do you need this cool new internet connected thing? Is it going to make your life a million times easier? Great. What's your business case? Build it. If you do not need it and everything's working fine as is, and everything's wonderful and your farm is running perfectly and there's sun in the sky, don't get it. Don't bring it in. Not until you absolutely need it. And I know that's not exactly like the cool trendy thing to say, but why do you need more internet connected stuff if the stuff that you already have isn't protected? You're just going to add more attack vectors and make it easier for adversaries to get in there and mess with your stuff. Like that's
interesting. Can I jump in? Because
Sure.
I'm trying to picture these devices. You just take these things for granted. So we're in a big dairy operation. We're at home. There's a few people that work there, owners, the kids. They have a nice big office. Let's say they put a Roomba robot in there to just clean the office area. They have one of those Siri little voice automated things because it's cool and they like to ask her to play music. What else? Like, what are those
They
things?
have an internet ready kettle to boil water.
Fridges, any of
Fridges.
those
Yeah.
things that we really probably don't need.
I mean, they're cool. Don't get me wrong. I think they're really cool, but
Well, so do our adversaries. I mean,
Yeah,
you
that's what
love
I was
those things.
saying.
They create these little bot armies. So the ones you haven't changed the passwords on, they probably have it under control right now. They use those for denial of service attacks on websites. They just overwhelm it with requests from these giant bot armies, and you would never know your fridge is out there functioning in a malicious aspect unless you've done what Kristin says and go change your password.
Yeah. So I would suggest if you're going to bring any of that in, you're going to have to change the passwords. So you'll have to take the default administration password and change it. Also the username, more than likely. And do not change your Wi-Fi to something like don't hack this. Please don't, because that literally makes even me want to go, I'm going to hack your stuff because it just is annoying. Don't do that. You can even hide your broadcast. You can do all kinds of cool stuff, right? And that's a lot of them. What they'll do is they'll hide, their little supposed Wi-Fi pineapples, as they call them, their little devices that sit there and they used to look like a pineapple. They don't anymore, but, and they're very small. Things can be very small these days. So, if you want a Roomba, cool. Just don't connect it to your Wi-Fi. It can run without it actually, and just shut off the capability. That's fine. Same with the kettle. Same with your fridge. You don't have to have it internet connected. You can literally shut that off and it will stay off if you continually keep it off. That's the kind of stuff, like I said, you have to question, do you need it? Do you need it or do you want it? And when it comes to like the actual equipment that's around the livestock and things like that, I totally get that you need that kind of thing. We're not going to milk cows by hand. I get that stuff, but how is that connected to the internet? That's the questions.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said people that tour your farm too, because I'm thinking out loud. One of the big things we're always advocating, farm tours.
Yep.
Egg in the classroom, and that's becoming more and more common. And being the trusting individuals we are, wanting to make a difference and educate our urban population, what's to say there isn't a person in there that's an activist? And then they get in your barn, like you're saying, right? They get onto your Wi-Fi and then they can take and then hack you from there. Like, who would even think of this stuff?
They do. They do. I mean, Andrew could speak to this.
Yeah, we track them very closely. They're good. They're good. I give them, I give all of our adversaries respect. They're smart people. They have their own agendas. I don't believe in what they're doing, but
Mhm.
the way they do it, we can learn some lessons from there. Another thing too, and this kind of goes back on a more macro level, Tracy. What can a farmer do? Just be skeptical. Be suspicious. There's a
Yes.
place for that right now. I spoke at the National Farm Bureau convention in Atlanta a couple of years ago, and we had a senior FBI agent on the stage with us talking about the latest in agricultural threats. The top one, romantic scams. So if you're a farmer out there and you're single and somebody approaches you and says, "Hey, I've always wanted a farming lifestyle, blah, blah, blah," um, don't give them money, number one.
Mm.
And the other piece too, Kristen says that our adversaries are very patient. They'll sit there and wait until something happens. And one of the things they love to wait for is a financial transaction. So we saw that was the number two thing on the list of way ag was getting hit, where it was a sale of land, a sale of a house. There was a financial transaction happening, and somebody would email from one of the parties because they're in your email system saying, "Hey, we've changed the banking routing number. Send it here." The FBI said, "You know what? In those instances, I know it doesn't sound right. Have a written piece of paper. You never change the routing number until that written piece of paper is handed from one hand to the other. That's someone you trust. That's the only time you change that routing number." We're starting to see a lot more social engineered attacks. Yeah. I mean, everything is vulnerable. If someone wants to get into your system, they're going to get in. Doesn't matter who you are, what kind of protections you have, they'll get in there. The other part that our adversaries are finding with AI, they're able to create these synthetic personas, and it could be a person it could be you, it could be a family member, or it could be someone that's like you that has the same demographic tendencies that you do with an entire network and history that's synthetically generated to make it more believable. And we found that over and over again, they're going after low and mid-level employees within organizations and compromising them. And oftentimes going back to the other motivation beyond financials, notoriety. There's a group out there called comms that for them, the highest and greatest glory is taking out as many things as possible before they're arrested and sent to prison for the rest of their lives. They view that as a badge of honor. They're much, much, much more brutal than what I'm outlining here. And if you do want to have a really dark night, go and read about the comms and their associated gangs and their techniques. But they're the ones that took down one of the casinos in Las Vegas through a social engineered attack. They speak like we do. Not that they don't have to with AI. I mean, anyone can speak like I do now with AI.
Yeah.
But to keep that in mind too, so it's not just necessarily going to be a penetration through a hacker finding an unpatched system or a bad password. It could just be them engaging your child or somebody in your staff that begins that level of communication.
Yeah, that's actually a really good shout out there, Andrew, because social engineering is basically what we deal with. That's what it is. It's not the tech. And I think that's what I want to hear. It's what I want to ring true here. It's not always about the tech. We were talking about tech because it's what everybody wants to know. What am I supposed to do with my tech?
Right.
But ultimately, it's that how am I going to work over this person to get to what I need? And that's really what it comes down to. And it's scary, the lengths that they'll go. And, some of the stuff that you see in movies isn't so far-fetched from some of the stuff that we've heard and dealt with. I hate to say it like that. And I'm not saying all of it, and I'm not starting a conspiracy theory here. But
No, these scripts write themselves. I
really
mean,
do.
we had the most fascinating time that we can never talk about or talk very little about.
It's true. And it's funny because Andrew's the first person I've ever heard out loud say that he has respect for our adversaries, because I've always thought, wow, I have so much respect for them because they are able to circumvent so many things that we didn't even think about. Their creativity is unmatched at times. And yet we've got to stay on top of it. We are playing catch up a lot of times. We are chasing tail. It is really bad. And I think the fact that we're now trying to take a step back and say, okay, great, I'm off the repeat pattern of recovery. I want to be resilient. It changes your mindset. So that distrust, that, constantly being curious, suspicious, as Andrew said, is the best way to have defense. So that means being suspicious of new people in your environment, including your tour. Like, not because it's going to necessarily be an animal activist who's going to scream like whatever they scream and do crazy things. It's just as simple as if you let one of those teenagers on your Wi-Fi because they're smart and they're going to get there, because they can't text their girlfriend or whatever it is in that moment. So they need to find a Wi-Fi. Don't leave it open. Lock it. Have a password on it. Change your password. whatever time frame you feel. I would change it as often as you can, as you remember, but do it often. And I realize that that's tedious and annoying, but there's password managers. There's things that are going to help you. You just have to do your due diligence with it. Or phone a friend, as I say, which is, the Ghostbusters moment. Phone a friend.
That's my next question. Who are you going to call? Where are our Ghostbusters? Is it for farmers in the audience? And let's hope they see this and remember this and reference back to this. If something happens, who does that? That's the unfortunate part with farming to begin with, because you're a solo operator, right? Just like a small business, you're wearing all the hats. You're everything to yourself. I mean, these big corporations will have departments, whether they're good enough yet or not. But for that farmer, who do they call?
Well, who do you call when your tractor has a problem?
The mechanic.
Okay. So who do you call when you have another issue that you don't know what to deal with? Do you call another farmer? Do you call a friend?
You probably
call
find
a family member
in the area.
Yeah. So you could start there. That's the fine place to start as far as I'm concerned. That usually ends up leading to the next and to the next. If you had an incident, you've been hit by a cyber attack, that's when you need to call the authorities, like the FBI, for example. Andrew's a big player of that. Call the FBI. They'll come in and they'll figure out what happened. They're not going to fix it, but they'll figure out what happened so they can arrest somebody. That's ideally what you need to do if you actually have a cyber attack happen. Let's go get the bad guys. Let's get the people who hurt you. That's definitely something you should do. But like I said, they're not going to fix your problem. They're just going to come in and figure out what happened, and then they're going to leave. And they don't care about the shame of it. They don't care that it happened. They just want to get the bad guy or person. So definitely law enforcement. I know that there really isn't like an agricultural cybersecurity center. I wish there was. I wish that would happen. But there aren't enough of us in the cybersecurity side that understand agriculture and the food industry. Andrew, you wanted to say something? I cut you off.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I mean, for the time being, the bio-ISAC, we are holding the breach here for agriculture until somebody figures out that something needs to be set up. Anyway, we stand by to assist in any way possible. Our email address is say it again, cut. Our address is help@isac.bio. isac.bio, and we have people that monitor that 24 hours a day. So in addition to whatever who else you call, feel free to email us as well to keep us in the loop. I asked the FBI the same question. I said, who should a business call when something goes wrong? And the guy got really animated. He said, call everyone. And I said, okay.
Call everyone.
I said, fair enough. But one thing to think about too, if this is an animal activist related incident, there is the Animal Ag Alliance, the Animal Agriculture Alliance, and they do really good, not only post-event support, but they also will help with employment screening and give you some best practices to ensure that people don't get on your payroll that maybe should not be on your payroll. Okay. And then keep in mind your insurance company. That's all. Well, that's always an iffy one. I'll leave that up to you whether you make that your first phone call or not, because that's a whole different process and procedure that occurs when they get involved in these things.
Right. And that was a question that I had for you, because there is now cybersecurity policies or components. And actually, after our last episode aired, Kristin, one of the farmers commented, and actually, I can't remember if he said he did add that component to his policy. He's in the States, or he was considering it and didn't know if it was worth it. I can't remember the result, but should farmers be looking at that?
Sure. I wouldn't tell you not to. I think insurance in general is something we all know we need to have in different places, but we don't really like paying the bill, Speaking from someone who owns their own business, I don't appreciate my insurance bill at times. However, cyber insurance is still newer, is what I'll say. So there's some bugs to work out. There is difficulty underwriting because the underwriters have never really written for cyber issues. It's getting better because they're hiring cybersecurity professionals to come in, especially the larger bodies, which is great. But the problem is, it goes back to what I just said. There's just not enough cybersecurity people who understand the agricultural side. So I would find out from your insurance provider how they underwrite cyber insurance and all the conditions that go with it. So if you shut down your equipment because you know you have a cyber attack, are you still going to get a payout for your cyber insurance? That could be up in the air, right? Because you know you're doing the right thing by shutting your facility down, because that won't spread any further, and you can move your livestock out, or you can do whatever you're going to do to recover and to be resilient. But sometimes if you shut your system down rather than the hacker shutting you down, that could be a difficulty on payout. I've had conversations with different insurers, and that's definitely been a weird one, I guess is what I'll say. So I think it's still a good thing to look at, but you need to make the decision what's best for your business. I'm never going to tell anybody what to do, but I definitely wouldn't discount it. I would take a look at it. And then do you call them when you have a problem? They're not going to fix it for you. They're just going to tell you what they're going to do, like for you, I guess, if they can do anything. The problem is when you get hit with this attack, you have to figure out who's going to help you get through it. And that's the part that's the hardest. The insurance company isn't necessarily going to hold your hand as much as those commercials on TV show you that they're going to. I don't think they're going to. So, and especially when it comes to cyber insurance, it's such a gray area at times that I would do your due diligence and learn as much as you can about it, and what's going to work best for your facility.
Sounds like wise advice. Okay, preventatives, who we gonna call? Insurance?
Well, I've got a few words to add on insurance too. If you think about cyber insurance, we're a couple of years into it, so the market's maturing a little bit. They're getting a little bit of actuarial data. But if you think about it as an analogy to the long-term care insurance policy amount in the United States that would pay ad infinitum all your nursing home bills, the insurance company realized after they wrote a bunch of those policies, they were upside down. They were getting sunk. And that's the same thing that's happening in cyber right now.
Mm-hmm.
The liability in cyber, I think it was for every 70 cents they take in, they pay out $2. There was some crazy metric right now in cyber. Yeah. So if you are a farmer and interested in getting cyber insurance policy, just first of all, see if you can get it. Mm-hmm. You got to have a whole bunch of things done before you can even apply for that. Then it's going to be very expensive. So the unfortunate trend that we're starting to see is businesses going naked. So they're going out without coverage. If you are lucky enough to get coverage, make sure all your policy documents are not stored on your hard drive or anywhere that's accessible. That's one of the first places these thieves go to, because they want to figure out how much your insurance company is going to pay out. And that's the exact demand. And oftentimes they'll call the insurance company first and start negotiating with them before they contact you. So you want what they call air gap, or have a printed copy in a file, some old manila file in a drawer, keep your policy there. And I think that the insurance brokers now are stressing that as well for your cyber policies.
Okay. You said air gapped, Andrew. It's a taboo word in it's OT security for sure. But yes, that's true. That's actually a good point. Make sure it's in a fireproof safe as well, because you just don't want to lose it, for sure. But yeah, no, it's true. It's still evolving, and that's why I said make sure you do your due diligence on it, because you don't want to make a bad mistake and then not get the money you need or pay out too much, because you're already paying a lot as a farmer. Like, it's a big deal. So just make sure you do your best. And if you have the safeguards up, that some of the ones we mentioned, and there's of course some other ones out there, that's a really good first step, where maybe cyber insurance isn't necessarily going to be the route for you. Not every cyber attack results in a ransomware attack. I mean, I just want to throw that out there. A lot of it comes down to, again, is that social engineering that may not necessarily be ransomware. So I think we focus on ransomware a lot because it's the hot thing in the news all the time, and it's not always that. It could literally just be a disrupt, or just a brand disruption, or any type of disruption to the supply chain. Because like I said, every one of the farmers that are listening, you are part of critical infrastructure. You are it. Like, you need to own that for yourself. Be proud about it, but also realize the responsibility that comes with that. Andrew and I take our jobs really seriously. We know that we're supporting something that's helping humanity and will continue to help humanity. So for us, it's, we stand right next to you and we understand the severity of it. So please just know that you're not alone. You have to just reach out, whether it's BioASSEC, you drop us an email, you send a carrier pigeon, we'll figure it out. It's one of those things. And I know that it all sounds kind of daunting, like, oh no, you don't know where to go. There just isn't a center to call yet. There just isn't a place to go. And it's not because we didn't do it yet, or we just don't know. for some reason, cybersecurity and technology is still so new in the food industry, even though it's been around for like ever. It's just now become a quote problem, and it's not a problem. It's just exploitable. So we need to make it harder for these people. I would like to see the agriculture community make it so hard for these bad actors and nation states to get into them that it's comical at that point if somebody even tries. That's what I would like to see in my lifetime. That's what I would love. Now, this is my pipe dream.
Well, guys, this has been an entertaining, informative, I cannot lie, overwhelming episode, because you just start going through. It's like, okay, what do I need to do? Jokes aside, I really appreciate this because this is important. It's our food, right? And yeah. Andrew, I know, and same with you, Kristin, and us, and the people in the audience, our biggest frustrations in this industry is that people don't realize farming and the food industry is how they eat.
Yeah.
And great, because we live in such a world that it's taken for granted. I think the pandemic was probably the first shakeup on the fact that stuff can go wrong and they might not get food. But for the most part, we're so lucky that we don't think about where our food comes from, right? So yeah, good and bad. I know. And for you guys, that's frustrating as well. So I was going to ask for final words of wisdom. I know you've sprinkled that throughout, and advice and tips. Let's share some parting words. And then if anybody wants to reach out to you, how can they do so?
Mm-hmm. Andrew, go ahead.
Sure. Number one, Tracy, thank you so much for allowing us to have this platform to spread the word. I know this is a dark subject matter. And one of the things that I think is a benefit and attribute that I have that enables me to do this so well is I have gallows humor. I just love the dark side of the humor of this thing, because if you don't have that, then it's just full of despair. So keep that's a little bit of an antidote for you to keep in mind, that you might just want to laugh at a few of these things. And you know what? Farmers have the same sort of gallows humor. If everything you own is collateral for one paycheck you're going to get, you're rolling some pretty big dice, and, the gallows humor comes into play there. The parting advice I would have to your community is, if you take in information and have an emotional response to it, you're being manipulated. You need to ask yourself, number one, why are you allowing yourself to be manipulated, and who benefits from you being manipulated in this manner? A friend of ours, Pablo, is a fantastic resource on countering information warfare, and he runs a nonprofit called Disarm Foundation. It's a great framework for taking information in and seeing, okay, what is the lineage? How should I respond to this or mute this type of information? But always ask yourself because as you take information in, if you have an emotional response, it's going to your reptilian brain that doesn't have language. So you can't really say why you're being that until it comes into the rational brain. So just stop and say, why do I feel this way?
I like that. Andrew, real quick, I think we need to do an episode on the psychology. I love psychology, but I mean, you're right. I mean, that fear, and that's, I imagine, how they get people, right? It's that fear factor.
Oh yeah, it's pretty simple to mind hack a human, but we'll save that for another episode.
Okay.
I'm really glad that you brought up the misinformation, disinformation, Andrew, because that is actually something that we deal with in that social engineering aspect. So absolutely, I tell everybody, I'm going to get a t-shirt that says, if you have an emotional response to this, don't believe it. And also, I love, there's some new t-shirts out there that say thank a farmer on it. And I was like, oh, those are brilliant. We need more of those. Don't be surprised if I show up to some conference with that on. Anyways, I think parting is, you're not alone. You're not alone. How many farmers do you know? You're not alone. Everybody's going through this, right? Just because you're not an expert in cybersecurity or IT doesn't mean that you aren't capable of handling anything. You can handle more than most average people do. Insert whatever you want here. Sure. I think that the grit and the resilience of the industry is paramount to, we will get through this. We will get through this come hell or high water. And I really think that, again, because you are a critical infrastructure, start acting like it, flex more. I'm critical infrastructure. I need support. You demand it from your government, demand it from the people around you in your community. But do it politely, of course. Don't be a jerk about it. But, and really say, like, hey, question. Something that recently someone said to me that's really stuck in my head was, when an incident happens, it's the community that suffers the worst, right? Think of any disaster, local disaster. It's the community that get hit the worst, right? It's not the nation. The nation felt it, but it was the nation. It's the community. When a cyber attack hits agriculture, it's the whole community that gets affected, because it's not just the one dairy that's down the street. It's everybody, because now you start to question your own situation, or it's hurt the supply chain and it's affected you in some way, or you knew the family that was involved in it. So you have to start thinking about it like that. We're a community, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to come together to be resilient, to survive this. I think if we had that mindset, it would actually throw off the nation state a little bit more, because they look at us as individuals, not as a unit. So I think that could be very powerful as a whole.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about how Estonia defeated Russia in the first cyber war in 2007, that's exactly what they did. They became resilient as a society. So it works.
It does. And I think if we did that as a sector, I think that would really help improve the supply chain as well, because we'd have a better understanding of it, because nobody's got a handle on that either. And that's one of the biggest problems. And that's not for anybody to sort out right now on this podcast or beyond. We all just have a teeny weeny bit of it, and just a piece of it. But yeah, don't feel like you're alone. Don't get overwhelmed. Like Andrew said, if you are having an emotional experience, we're not trying to social engineer you. We're trying to give you the reality of it. But moving forward, start questioning things. Do you need this? Who's this? Why are they here? And you don't have to be like the angry person on the front lawn telling people to get off it, unless you want to be that person, I suppose. But you don't have to go that far. You can have that kind of, questionable mindset of, hey, this doesn't feel right, smell right, doesn't look right, it's not right. Then you need to trust your gut. That's what we're trying to get you to do, is to trust your instinct of that.
Well, and I think this episode will have given a lot of food for thought and a lot of tips and steps. And you know what I find, honestly, talking about the psychology as a business owner, you hit the fear wall. What is one of the best remedies for fear? Action. You know what? Watch this, get a list out, make a list of all the tips that Kristin and Andrew gave, and then just start working on them. And right there, you're going to feel so much better, right?
And also make a list of all the stuff you have that's got technology connected to anything. Right next to that list.
Start deactivating all this stuff. But to me, anytime I hit that fear mode in life, it's always, okay, I need to do an action. And then you feel so much better, right? Yeah. So I think that's probably the number one takeaway. Write a list of your technology, and just be aware.
Yep.
Is that a good way to sum it up?
Yeah, I think that's a great way.
I'm working on my fear mode out loud here. So you guys are benefiting.
This is therapy, Tracy. We're working through cybersecurity therapy.
Well, if you want therapy, let's stay on after. You guys, this was great. Thank you. This is so highly specialized. I wish we didn't have to talk about it, but we're here and we know it's a thing. And I really appreciate you guys spending your time, your energy, sharing your wisdom. So thank you so much. Andrew, thank you. Kristin, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's been an honor. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You guys in the audience, don't be overwhelmed. Take action, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye, guys.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.